Thank you for those waiting us online for joining us as well. I would hand over the floor to Obi, who is Africa Director of the New Humanitarian, which is a very important publication that actually covers humanitarian and peace and security issues globally. And Obi, so wonderful to have you with us. Please kindly invite the members of the panel. His Excellency Ambassador Charles, once again, thank you very much for honoring us with your presence and for being able to share with us Rwanda's experience and indeed its important role in respect to the subject matter at hand. Thank you, Ambassador. And we have Dawit, we have Tafsihat, then I think Ambassador Aminu is also online, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. Just as a few introductory remarks, on the plane here last night, I was reading the UN study published in October. Given the sudden new questioning of former certainties, the real challenges to the global multilateral system, I can only sympathize with the authors who are in the room with us today. The rug seems to have been pulled from under them. This panel is on trends in peace support operations in Africa and the future of peacekeeping. So have some sympathy for us as well. As we know, African-led PSOs are a trend that are an integral part of the international system's response to the security challenges on the continent. They can deploy faster, are cheaper, and are also heavily militarized, taking on operations that the UN normally shirks from. And they look in some circumstances very much like anti-terrorism missions. African-led PSOs include AU-run missions, as you know, like AWESOME, the regional economic communities such as SADC, and ad hoc task-specific initiatives like the four-country multinational joint task force, MNJTF, tackling ISWAP in the Lake Chad region. They are, of course, all dependent on external financing. I'm a journalist and covered ISWAP and Boko Haram for a number of years. So I'm particularly interested in the Lake Chad region as an especially difficult warscape. It's where government authority and legitimacy is heavily contested by ideologically driven opponents, while the transnational nature of the conflicts complicates the response. The MNJTF does counterinsurgency aggressively, which cannot really be an end in itself. There has been a trend towards working with local authorities, the UN, the World Bank, in a more soft power approach. This is a more hearts and minds and development leaning approach, but it's also precisely the kind of expensive nation building that the new post-multilateral realist Washington scorns. Professor Paul Williams has noted the financing and geostrategic implications of that. But what has also been hinted at is that the need for dialogue, even with people that are considered beyond the pale, and conflict prevention and mediation as underutilized options. So enough from me. I'm now gratefully turning to the panel to explore the new trends and the future of African-led peacekeeping. If we could start first, please, with General Charles Karamba.
Thank you very much, moderator, for giving me this opportunity. I want to indeed also thank Aman Africa for putting this together, and certainly to thank the previous panel that gave us a quite enlightening presentation on the 30 models that they came up with. It is indeed coming at a critical time. So, like I said, I want to thank the organizers of this important dialogue for inviting Rwanda to take part in this event and to speak to the participants in this gathering. I thank the authors of the research paper that indeed were presented. It was so well done and well researched. I must say that I ended their presentation a very enlightened person in as far as peacekeeping is concerned. This dialogue is taking place at a critical moment when different countries in Africa and around the globe are facing violent conflicts and destructive wars. It is therefore my hope that the outcomes of this dialogue will contribute to the reshaping of the current and future peacekeeping environment. And most importantly, it restore peace and security in the countries currently affected by conflicts. Having said that, I think I need to give a short perspective on Rwanda's role in peacekeeping operations and peace support operations. Distinguished participants, as you may be aware, Rwanda has been a key player in maintaining international peace and security through peacekeeping and peace support operations since 2004. 2004 was only just 10 years after the genocide that took place against the Tutsi in Rwanda. And it was only 10 years after we ourselves as a country had a peacekeeping mission in the country. Its performance and happened then is a subject of discussion at another time. Currently, Rwanda has contributed overall around or beyond more than 85,000 peacekeepers to the AU and the UN missions in Sudan, in South Sudan, and the Central African Republic, and under bilateral arrangements in Mozambique and Central Africa. Talking about bilateral arrangement, I think having carefully listened to the previous panel, the bilateral arrangement clearly fits within the models that were described to us. Presently, Rwanda ranks, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the 4th largest TCC globally, and it's the first in Africa with over 5,900 plus military and police personnel in support of UN peacekeeping operations, and 2,500 plus in Mozambique on a bilateral arrangements. Rwanda's role in peacekeeping operations and other bilateral, as well as regional engagements and interventions, are part of the constitutional mandate of our defense force to ensure that the tragedy that befell Rwanda in 1994 may possibly never happen again within our sub-region. Rwanda's approach to peacekeeping operations emphasizes on a historical approach to peace building that includes not only military intervention, but also community engagement, reconciliation processes, and socio-economic development. This approach has earned our engagements smooth and cordial relations with the communities during our peacekeeping operations. Now, the topic before us is the trends in peacekeeping support operations and the future of peacekeeping. Distinguished participants, with regard to trends in peace support operations in Africa and the future of peacekeeping, I wish to start by commending the African Union, Regional Economic Communities, the RECs, and troop contributing countries for their role and sacrifice made in peace operations in Somalia, where we had AMISOM, then ATMIS, and currently graduated to OSA. All these operations, of course, are there against Al-Shabaab. And then we need also to talk about the Multinational Joint Task Force, MNJTF, against Boko Haram. This trend reflects a desire for Africa solutions to African problems, including dealing with mushrooming non-state actors that include terrorists, insurgents, and international organized criminal networks. However, the future of peacekeeping operations in Africa is likely to be more complex due to several factors, and I will highlight a few of them. Number one, the rapidly changing nature of threats that capitalize on advancement in technology to spread violent extremism and ideologies, to spread hate speech and use of lethal weapons like drones and IEDs. Second and critical one, which was apparently talked about by the previous panelists. The second one, which is critical, is the geological and global dynamics that shape and delay conflict prevention. I think in the previous panel, if I remember correctly, it was Professor Paul who talked about it, but at the level of the UN Security Council. Since he's still in the room, I will maybe seek to hear from him how he sees this in the perspective of the mission area, because it is also critical. There is geopolitical and global dynamics that are general around in mission area, and it has an impact on peacekeeping. It does not only stop at the level of the UN Security Council, where we are talking about agreeing on the mandate, agreeing on putting together a mission, etc. But it needs also to be looked at within the mission area after the mission has been approved and given a mandate. Having said that, I want to be very brief. Rwanda commends the work done by the authors of this research paper and wishes to add a few points to ponder on or to discuss as we go along. Point number one, peacekeeping missions are not an end in themselves. There is a need to lay emphasis on political solutions to conflicts and then conflict prevention, because it is where everything should start from. Talking about conflict prevention, there must be a critical assessment of the state or the government, individual state role, and then the partners. This is something that needs to be critically looked at. The second point, there needs to be a thorough understanding of the root causes of conflicts, a particular conflict in this case. And then promotion of local ownership of conflict resolution initiatives. These should be at the core of any peacekeeping mission from our experience. Here I am talking about peacekeeping mission. Normally, we were told about planning, and any plan has an exit strategy. That exit strategy at times, when it is not well thought out, when the aspect of governance, the state ownership, where the mission is supposed to be taking place, is not well articulated and followed up through, we end up with missions that are kind of not having any end state in sight. It is an important point that we need to look at. I'm talking about, of course, in the first place, some of these conflicts to come up, there are root causes, like I mentioned earlier. So, and some of those root causes are not well handled by some of our governments. Some that are inept, corrupt, and whatever one would imagine. So this incompetence, when a mission comes in a country, and then you are in mission area and you are dealing with a situation that you first and foremost studied as you were crafting this mission, and then its mandate, but the whole problem keeps coming, and then you end up getting stuck. Peacekeeping is something that, in most cases, is something that brings stability, it brings confidence to the population, but over time, the confidence starts eroding due to several factors. So this is why the root causes of these conflicts and ownership is a critical thing to look at and to keep monitoring all through. The third point is that notwithstanding the UN Security Council primary responsibility under the United Nations Charter to maintain international peace and security, due consideration should be given to regional and bilateral responses to crisis situations. What am I talking about here? We need to, it has been discussed before, we need to find a way of strengthening the AU peace and security architecture. Very, very important. As Africans and our partners, this is something that we need to work on seriously, because we said it earlier, African problems can be resolved by Africans, but we need to have institutions in place, strengthen them ourselves, and seek support from our partners. Within the structure that we have currently, we have the department, PSOD department in the peace, in the PAPS Commission. This is a, PSOD is a very small, very, very small entity. And yet, we were told earlier that any peacekeeping, the first and foremost thing to be done is planning. And this is the planning element that we have in our African Union. Yet, it is a very small entity and resourced, lack of human resource, etc. So this is an area that we would focus on in as far as strengthening the peace and security architecture of the African Union. And then the funding aspect. funding, financing our own peacekeeping operations has been talked about for quite some time. But this is something that can be done. We are looking at Resolution 2719. I think it has failed to take off, but it is something that has come at the right time. It needs to be supported at the UN Security Council level and by the partners. Lastly, we need to look at these models that we have been given and see how bilateral initiatives that I talked about earlier, how robust they can be in as far as creating a conducive environment on ground. The case in point is that for those who may not be aware, there is what we called ICRA for East African Community Regional Force, which was earlier deployed in the Eastern DRC. For the 6 months that this force was there, it created a conducive environment for whatever was supposed to be followed, and it was deployed rapidly. But unfortunately, due to so many other factors that may not be up for discussion here, this force mandate was terminated and things went back to where they were before and even worse. Secondly, we need to, at the African level, to encourage the bilateral interventions. The ones that have been done, at least from my background, 2 of them, the one in Mozambique and the one in Central Africa, created a difference in a very short time. They stabilized the situation for other things to follow. Economic activities have returned in a place in Mozambique called Cabo Delgado as a result of a bilateral intervention between Rwanda and Mozambique. The same happened in Central Africa. Elections were about to take place, and the insurgents were heading to the capital to disrupt elections. A quick bilateral intervention was done, and that advance was stopped and elections were held. And we have a government currently, a stable government, and life is normal. But all these need support from the partners. They need to have a structure and a very good mechanism in place at the level of the regional mechanism and at the level of the African Union. With that, moderator, I think I need to yield the floor and give you the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. We're now going to test our communication system by going online to Mr. Ahmed Sameh, who is the Deputy Director of the Cairo International Center for Conflict Resolution, Peacekeeping, and Peacebuilding.
Hello, do you hear me? Hello, everybody, do you hear me?
You're coming through loud and clear. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good. Thank you a lot, moderators. Thank you all, and good morning, excellencies, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like first and foremost to thank Amani Africa for convening this very important meeting, which aligns with the much needed collective effort to be synergized across the African continent, and which complements actually what we are doing as CCCPA in this regard. So as we convene ahead the 2025 UN Peacekeeping Ministerial Conference, amidst the ongoing review of all forms of peace operations, the Peacebuilding Architecture Review, the recently published UNDP Commission study on the future of peacekeeping, really policy conferences like this one, like we are attending today, anchored in an African setting, are really essential for amplifying African voices and perspectives, which is central to these discussions and to be evolving security landscapes that the continent grapples with. This is particularly relevant given that Africa is expected to be at the forefront of addressing security challenges, highlighting its comparative advantage, the advantage of the EU and its regional organizations as first responders with the political will to undertake peace enforcement. Consequently, tailoring future models of peacekeeping to the unique realities of African context is imperative for ensuring the effectiveness and success of future responses. So in this regard, we as CCPA has been actively advancing or trying to advance African perspectives on the future of peace operations through a series of strategic initiatives. So this effort began with a high-level panel during the fourth edition of Aswan Forum for Sustainable Peace and Development, where Amani Africa was present back then through the Director Solomon. And the panel was titled New Horizons Towards Fit for Purpose Peace Operations in Africa, which provide a platform to amplify African voices, featuring the former special representative of the chairperson of the African Union Commission in Somalia, the director of the Conflict Management Directorate of the DPAPs as well. And building on this momentum, we organized another workshop called African Perspectives on the Future of Peace Operations as part of our co-chairmanship of the African Union network of think tanks for peace, Net for Peace, with the African Union Commission. And one of the key takeaways included the centrality of the political solution to addressing evolving security challenges, the importance of political will of conflicting parties to sustain peace, and the indispensable role of national ownership and context specificity. Additionally, discussions emphasize the need for nimble, efficient missions with robust command and control, as well as growing importance of integrating peace-building efforts alongside peacekeeping. And I think the next panel will tackle this, will tackle more this, so the relation between peacekeeping and peacebuilding, because this is extremely important, and we work on this as well in CCPA. So growing importance of integrating peace-building efforts alongside peacekeeping is critical for establishing lasting peace. So this workshop was followed by CCPA's side event during the 2025 Munich Security Conference, which titled Shifting Ties Towards the Next Generation of African-Led Peace Operations as well. The discussion here underscored the need for multilateral approaches to peace operations, emphasizing collective responsibility for maintaining peace, with a particular focus on African leadership, predictable financing, effective coordination, and addressing the root causes of the conflict. So all these efforts align with the conclusion of the fourth edition of Aswan Forum, which highlighted the importance of forging African-owned innovative solutions to the continent's most pressing challenges, particularly in re-envisioning the future of peace operations in Africa. Such initiatives actually are expected to contribute to the fifth edition, which will take place at the end of this year, further reinforcing the commitment to shaping the future of peace operations in Africa. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we are witnessing the convergence of several key developments shaping the future of peace operations, these include the call embedded in the new agenda for peace for a new generation of peace enforcement and counterterrorism operations, the Pact of the Future's emphasis on enhanced cooperation between the UN and regional and sub-regional organizations, and the momentum generated by the historic UN Security Council Resolution 2790. So together, these elements are driving efforts to deploy African-led peace operations, placing them at the forefront of responses to security challenges, strengthening African ownership of peace and security initiatives, emphasizing the indispensable role of peace enforcement throughout the peace continuum, and accounting, of course, for the unique realities of the African continent. So this is the relevance and the necessity of the EU peace support operations have long been emphasized in various UN frameworks and reports. So this argument dates back to Boutros Ghali's Agenda for Peace in 1992, Brahimi Report in 2000, both of which underscored the importance of partnerships in peace operations and the role of regional organization, particularly the African Union, in ensuring African ownership of conflict resolution efforts. This was further reinforced by the high-level independent panel on peace operations, the HIPPO report in 2015, which highlighted the need for logistical, financial, and political support for African-led operations, as well as the critical role of the African peace and security architecture and its various mechanisms. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, Egypt has a long-standing history of involvement in international and regional peacekeeping efforts, demonstrating a strong commitment to peace and security across the African continent. As a major troop contributing country, Egypt has played a crucial role in key policy discussions and has spearheaded initiatives such as the Cairo Roadmap on enhancing the performance of the UN peacekeeping operations, which was adopted as an African common position in 2020. And actually, this roadmap is still relevant, even if it was adopted 5 years ago. This roadmap underscored Africa's collective commitment to improving the performance of peacekeeping missions, from mandate formulation to mission exit strategies, advancing the reform agenda at the time. Similarly, it's time to replicate a Cairo roadmap model, uniting African voices to advance peace and security efforts in Africa. In addition, Egypt's commitment to ensuring stability across the African continent is evident in its anticipated contribution in the African Union Support and Stabilization Mission in Somalia, also a participation endorsed by the African Union Peace and Security Council in August 2024. The new mission in Somalia serves as a case in point, reflecting the evolving landscape of peace operation and significantly contributing to the ongoing debates on their future. Distinguished audience, CCCPA remains committed to delivering the highest standards of training and capacity building for Egyptian and African peacekeepers, demonstrating a strong commitment to evolving and adapting the new models of peace operations. In this regard, CCCPA conducted capacity building training on enhancing the role of Somali community leaders in PVE and CVE in Mogadishu, which included a visit of the OSEM headquarters and consultations with the former SRCC to assess the host country's need. This effort aligns with CCCPA's broader role in research and convening, as well as its position as a co-chair of Net for Peace, ensuring the coordination of evidence-based research tailored to the priorities and needs of the African Union Commission. Through these combined efforts, CCCPA supports essential peace and security activities while addressing the evolving security landscape that hinders peace and prosperity in Africa. So, in this context, allow me to reiterate the indispensable role of partnerships. As a speaker in the previous panel said, partnership will be is a very essential and name of the game, if I recall right. So partnerships are indispensable in these efforts, including those between the African Union and the United Nations. Within the African Union itself and with its tracks and ramps, strengthening these partnerships is essential to avoid a working in silos approach, which would limit the potential of what we as relevant stakeholders can achieve for a peaceful Africa. I will, if I may, like in 2 minutes, tell you to the recommendation of what we, of all the events of that we organized since last year regarding the future of the African, the future of peacekeeping and PSOs and all of this. So I will divide it into 2 segments. So the first one is to strengthen UN peacekeeping operations, what we should take into consideration while doing this. So while we strengthen the UN peace operations in Africa, we have to prioritize African ownership and leadership while enhancing as well regional cooperation and coordination with African and sub-regional organizations. We have to take into consideration that political solution should be advanced through clear, focused, and sequenced mandates that are achievable, and properly resourced with exit strategies based on clear benchmarks that are nationally owned and regionally, internationally supported, and that set realistic expectation for what peacekeepers can achieve. We have to take into consideration as well host countries' consent and cooperation between peacekeepers and the local government. They are fundamental for the mission success. It's crucial to provide a well-trained and well-equipped uniformed personnel and support the effective development and delivery of peacekeeping training, including gender-sensitive training for peacekeepers. So moreover, and with the international community increasingly relying on the African Union to manage complex and high-risk conflicts that other organizations are not able to address it, it's essential as well that partners fulfill their respective responsibilities in the collective efforts to sustain peace and security in Africa. So partners such as UN and EU should assist the African Union in establish logistics framework to effectively deploy and sustain peace support operations. This can include sharing best practices in logistics management, supply chain operations, and the use of technology to enhance operational efficiency. Providing technical expertise in mission planning, monitoring, evaluation, and reporting can enhance EU's operational capabilities as well. And as part of the ongoing discussion on the future of peace operations, it's crucial to reflect on the outcomes of the inaugural Lessons Learned Forum on EU peace support operations and the African Union Standby Force launched by the African Union 2 years ago. This initiative also aims to share experiences, identify challenges, and leverage best practices from past and current EU peace support operations. Last but not least, enhance cooperation between the African Union and regional economic communities, RECs and REMs, which have increasingly contributed to addressing asymmetric conflicts in their region and providing context-specific responses that could benefit from assessed contribution if deployed under EU's command and control. I will stop here. I hope that I didn't take too much. Thank you, moderator, and I'm very happy to respond to any questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ahmed Samet. He's representing Ambassador Saif Kandil, the Director General of the CCPA. Let's turn now to Tefsahet Hailu with Amani Africa.
Hey, thank you, Obi. Okay, building on what the previous panelists discussed, I'll mention 4 points with regards to the trends of peacekeeping operations in Africa. One is we see a shift from UN to AU-led peace operations, and we can observe this by the progressive reducing of the peacekeeping missions of the UN. Troop deployment is now getting to 54,000, and currently there are only 4 peacekeeping missions in Africa. And in the morning panel, it was mentioned that in the past 10 years, there were no new missions deployed by the UN. And we have also seen in the past couple of years political resistance coming from host countries on UN peacekeeping missions. And there is also a lack of trust from the local population. And this is observed by different factors. One being there is an imbalance between what's expected from the UN peacekeeping missions and what's actually on the ground. On this, our director, he put it, I think it's a better way of saying it when he said the crisis, there is a crisis of supply and demand in the equation of the supply and demand aspect of it. This is because there is the expectation of the host country, and there is an expectation from the local community when it comes to peacekeeping operations, and there is a mandate given to the peacekeeping missions, and that's not balancing. When you look into the conflict dynamics on the ground, it has evolved immensely in the past 20 years. So there is that issue. And when it comes to the relation between the UN and AU, there is the strategic agreement between the 2017 in 2017, recognizing AU as a key partner in peacekeeping and conflict resolution efforts. And the HIPPO report was also mentioned. The Secretary General's report, the 2023 Secretary General's reports also suggests the role that needs to be given to regional organizations. However, when we look into the reality, African states often they're gravitating towards ad hoc coalitions and regional interventions instead of AU-led missions, and this has complicated, or it could possibly complicate the implementation of the UN Security Resolution that was adopted in December 2024, because the resolution states that there will be a 75% assessed contribution to AU-led peacekeeping missions. So this is one point that I want to make. And the second point is, when we look into the trends of the AU peacekeeping missions, there are structural, financial, also logistical challenges that we can observe. When it comes to financial constraints, AU peace operations are heavily underfunded. They're hugely relying on significant external donors, and this has led to inconsistent and unpredictable funding models. For example, if we see the AU mission in Somalia, AUSOM, that's one example. It has only a funding that's secured for 6 months, and there is no long-term financial sustainability that's planned for the mission. We can also look into the SADC mission in the DRC, which is highly challenged with financial setbacks. And for a while, South Africa was shouldering the majority of the costs. So currently, the mission is under the process of phased withdrawal, but the conflict in the DRC is intensifying, and the humanitarian crisis is unbearable, and it's a burden for the local population. Another factor is, when we look into the structural and financial challenges, is when it comes, these financial challenges also contribute to manpower and logistical challenges in peacekeeping operations. Also, when we say structural challenges, there is weak intelligence sharing. There is a lack of coordination or weak coordination among African peacekeeping forces. That's coupled with internal political rivalries, and that further undermines their effectiveness. And when we see member states' contribution to peacekeeping efforts, member states frequently fail to meet their financial obligations which further complicates mission sustainability. That's also another factor. So this has led to the preference for regional coalitions due to financial and operational challenges. Many African states prefer deploying troops through regional coalitions. And that's, for example, there's the G5 Sahel, the MNGT are examples. And even these missions, if we see, for example, the G5 Sahel, it's suffering from regional, the regional economic communities are suffering from because of the military rule in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. It has threatened this mission. So this is another factor. And when we see funding that's expected from the UN, there is a reluctance to fund non-AU missions. The UN is hesitant to finance missions not directly led by the EU. Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm sorry about that. So I was saying that the UN is hesitant to finance missions not directly led by the AU, as seen with the SADC mission in the DRC. So these are the factors in relation to structural and financial challenges. Thirdly, I would like to focus on the doctrinal and operational limitations of the peacekeeping missions. There is an issue of command and control, and many African peacekeeping forces lack the necessary command structures and strategic planning capabilities for large-scale operations. And in relation, the relation between the REX and the AU, we have seen a post-facto referral of the deployment of peacekeeping, which is implying the lack of involvement of the AU. One example is the SAMI mission, the SADC mission in Mozambique, where AU was consulted after 6 months after SADC decided the mission's deployment to Mozambique. And when we see this, the Peace and Security Council protocol, it clearly envisages that the African standby force to be deployed in pursuit of a decision of the Peace and Security Council. And it puts the chairperson of the AU Commission at the top of the chain of command of the African standby force. But we don't see this. Mostly the AU is consulted after the deployment is decided by the regional economic communities. In addition to that, there is ineffectiveness of traditional peacekeeping. The conventional UN peacekeeping models are often unsuitable for conflict zones. As I have said it before, there are the conflict dynamics, it's changing immensely, and the peacekeeping operations are not fitting for this to tackle or to create peace in these conflict areas. So there is a need for a shift towards more robust interventions. And in addition to that, there is a blurring of peacekeeping and military operations. Peacekeeping models have increasingly become militarized, focusing on counterterrorism and stabilization rather than traditional peacekeeping. We have seen that in the case of ATMIS, SADC mission in Mozambique, also in the DRC. So these missions highlight the shift towards more offensive military operations, creating structural and logistical challenges. And lastly, I would like to draw your attentions to how these challenges or how these trends have created key institutional and operational gaps. One is what I mentioned in relation to the African standby force. which is originally envisaged as a rapid deployment peacekeeping force, the African Standby Force, remains underutilized due to political and operational challenges. And there is also a disconnect between mandates and capabilities, which I have mentioned earlier, with regards to missions in Somalia and the DRC have been given ambitious mandates without adequate logistical intelligence and air support, which led to operational failures. And another operational gap is the growing militarization of peace operations, which is the increased reliance on military solutions at the expense of civilian-led peace building, which has weakened long-term stability efforts. So when we think about the future of peacekeeping, there is a need for rethinking. One is the need for innovative peacekeeping approach. Traditional UN AU frameworks have struggled to deliver sustainable peace, and that necessitates the exploration of new models. And there is also a need for clarifying roles. The UN and AU must establish clearly mandated, ensuring better logistical, financial, and strategic coordinations. And thirdly, there is a need for balancing military and civilian components. Future peace operations must integrate military efforts with political and social reconciliation to achieve sustainable peace. So I'll finish there and proceed.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're now going to turn to Dr. David Johannes, Project Manager at ISS, for his remarks. And also, just to complicate your life, perhaps you could link the first panel discussion with this and even the next panel discussion as well, which I'm sure you can handle, that balancing act. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Once again, thank you for the opportunity. So I'll make one or two remarks about as a starting point, and then I'll move to speaking to the trend and finally the task that's given to me. So I'll start with a Latin quote, which is read as follows: Ex Africa semper alcit novi. And this translates directly into, there is always something new coming from Africa. There's always something new coming out of Africa. So this is by way of indicating a number of innovations around the role of Africans in terms of peace support operation on the continent. I think this is an important starting point. Often, as a contribution of the continent is often lost in the context of what is not working. But we can speak to a number of doctrinal change that deployments by African actors has introduced in terms of a number of institutional issues and all of that. I mean, including a kind of concerted actions that we see in terms of engaging the United Nations Security Council as well, which is an innovation. And the second one is a recognition of that peace support operations, peacekeeping operation in Africa are in transition. This links to what has been said earlier, and this is part of the major changes that's happening in the multilateral context. So, and this point is relevant because any assessment that we want to make about AUPSOs or UN peacekeeping operation in Africa needs to reflect this reality of a changing multilateral context, a changing regional multilateral context as well. So it would be unfair to just critique that the tools are not working. It's better to look at the broader environment where the toolbox is being deployed. So having said this, I'll speak to some of the trends which have been already mentioned, but maybe for the sake of emphasis, I'll repeat some of them. The first one is there is no monopoly over the question of who deploys the continents. And we're seeing a multiplication of deployments by the AU, by the UN, the REX, and the Arab coalition. And this is a result of the demand and the supply issues that Tafsir has spoken. So, but from a policy point of view, this multiplication of deploying actors calls the need for a more strategic coordination, a more strategic engagement among the different actors. And this is where we can bring the whole issue of the ongoing review, the strategic review of the Africa Standby Force concept. So this is an important opportunity, and I'll come back later also in terms of seizing this as an opportunity to engage with this process. My second point is in terms of having said that there is a multiplication of deploying actors, we also have to recognize there is no single actor which can be considered as a panacea. And the effectiveness of most of these deployments is increasingly being challenged as a result of a host of political and operational challenges. And this applies to UN peacekeeping operation, as we heard in the previous panel. I mean, using our identity as a think tank, I think we can be a little bit controversial here to say that sometimes we hear an overstated role of the REX in terms of being able to handle some of the security situations in their vicinity. We can make an argument that this is a little bit overstated because we're seeing some of the REX deployment having the same kind of challenge that AU deployments has faced in the past. So this needs to be factored also in the discussion. Another key trend is actually, which also by Tufset has spoken, is that the cross-cutting challenge of financing these peace support operations. So it's something to be proud that the AU and the REX have deployed about 27 peace support operations in the last 2 decades. But the issue of funding challenge has been the most cross-cutting challenge across. And the challenge even goes back all the way to 1981 when the OAU trust to deploy in Mali, as I heard in one of the presentation by Mr. El Gassimouan. So I think this issue of funding needs to be critically, it's not an add-on to the discussion because most of these missions are giving 100% of the objectives without the 100% resources that they require. So my employer cannot expect me to work 12 months and give me a 10-month salary. So this is some kind of analogy. Another key trend is the presence of parallel deployments alongside UN peacekeeping operation and AU peace support operations. And this is often the result of the demands of the operational environment, sometimes which is not always undertaken or which is always taken care of by the peace support operations. And most of the deployments in Africa, AU peace support operations, deployment by the REX, they have become much more robust, and they are what they call stabilizing operations, sometimes bordering war fighting. And this has led to the emergence of, I think, to a revisiting of the PSO doctrine on the continent. Another one, perhaps the most recent trend, would be a growing or more assertiveness of host nations. And this we're increasingly seeing it also in terms of mission planning. The withdrawal of consent, movement restriction, and all of that. This is something that we know, which exists in the past. I think currently we're also seeing a new trend in the sense that host nations have also been much more involved than they used to be in terms of planning of the missions as well. And finally, most of these deployments on the continent by the AU, by the UN, by the REX, it has led to a growing understanding of what partnership entails in practice, and giving more meaning to the idea of partnerships. So I think this needs to be factored as well. But by way of conclusion, I just want to flag a couple of points. Again, all of these trends and the existence of a very challenging conflict environment will actually demand that current instruments for deploying peace support operations and peacekeeping operations need to be significantly adjusted to reflect and meet these trends. And from a policy point of view, like I said, the whole discussion about the review of the SF concept is an important opportunity that AU member states need to engage with a sense of urgency it requires. I mean, the recalibration of AU PSOs and the role of the ASF need to be taken as part of the broader review of APSA. Salomon will vouch for me. There is an outstanding PSC decision 1163, which is asking for the review of APSA made in 2023. So I think it's really high time to act on this resolution, on this communique, and take it to the next level. I mean, to the extent that the UN is talking about a review of its broader peace frameworks, I think it's also high time for Africa to have its own review of its peace instruments. And this can even be a key priority for the new AUC leadership. Thank you very much.
So that was a lovely roundup. So we've been from the granular, the experience of the general, to typologies of PSOs, the changing threat environment, the importance of political solutions and exit strategies, financing, obviously a key point. 2719 passed in December, but we're almost certain that it's not going to fund awesome in Somalia. The host nation assertiveness is a point that often is overlooked. And we all know that peacekeeping is in transition, but to what? That's the issue. What are these new models? And Dawit made the important remark that perhaps it's time that the AU had a review of its architecture. So with that, I'll throw it open to the floor and grateful for your questions. Go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Shawit. I'm from the Irish Embassy. Just a question, and thank you to all the panelists for the great, interventions. You all raised, and in the previous presentation as well, the primacy of, political solutions for longer-term stability. Perhaps I wanted to hear a little bit more in this regard about, the political contestations and self-interest between member states, mostly within the same REC, existing within the same REC or regional arrangements, and what role that plays in terms of both, peacekeeping or transitioning peacekeeping to, peace building and as such. And, so what has been the experience of that in terms of, destabilizing each other, which the member states within one REC can play, and what role can the AU play, and how can it be positioned to play a role in terms of, mediating this destabilizing role that member states might have within each other. I just wanted to hear a little bit more on this, given that, you've all alluded to the primacy of political processes in maintaining long-term peace. Thank you.
Say one more or two more, actually.
Yeah, good morning. Hi, panel and distinguished guests here in the room. Andre again from the EU. This whole generic trend discussion might be flanked by at least reality on the ground. So mainly absence or weak governmental structures allow banditism, terrorism, transorganized crime, and whomever to take over responsibility. And then we have to put ourselves in the shoes of an elder or mayor on the spot, so who's living in these balance of power. And now we do have at least the new forces appearing there. And he's asking himself, what are they bringing? Are they bringing back governmental structures? Are they bringing back at least any kind of development and nexus that is needed? Or are they creating at least an environment that is coming and moving out? So trust at least by the government, trust at least by these forces which are appearing there is critical. These forces are critical on the ground, then at least peace will be has to be brought to the ground, and is then at least influenced by anything around cyber, information domain, and so on and so on. And so the question is for the trend, how we can influence this. I think there were good examples in MNGTF when at least MNGTF got similar capacities to bring back governmental resources for good, so that the people then could trust them. The same was in Mozambique also, when forces start acting in compliance with human rights. And so there are trends to do so, but the complex issue is how to merge these together to bring it at least upfront in a more coherent way, and taking into account the real root causes on the spot, which are also influenced by economic reasons, that counter-financing might also be part of this bubble. So it's getting more than just the forces on the ground.
Back.
Thank you all. It seems like the UN and the AU are at different opposite polarities with respect to financing. Let's just say, for example, the AU received the financing that it needed to operate some of these missions and so forth and so on. Now, would there be enough personnel, subject matter experts, or expertise to actually engage and operate, or would it be helpful to potentially have the regional economic organizations, the CSOs, have additional consultants, additional advisors to help to implement some of these policies and procedures? I've worked with certain organizations for the last 5 years, and I see that there are bottlenecks with respect to personnel doing the work. So would that also be something that can help relieve and help us achieve our goals, having additional personnel, additional subject matter experts to execute?
Thank you very much to all members of the panel. My question goes to His Excellency Ambassador General Charles. Ambassador, you mentioned the role of bilateral deployment as one of the trends that we need to be cognizant of, and you linked it with the need for supporting the African peace and security architecture. In terms of that link, how do you see the bilateral arrangements operating as part of and within the framework of the African peace and security architecture, in terms of the role of the AU, in terms of the support that you made reference to that is required for the success of bilateral arrangements as well? Thank you.
Well, seeing as that was to you, Ambassador, let's do the last question first.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, when you say how do you link the bilateral arrangement to the Africa peace, AU peace architecture, it is very easy. The first thing is, first and foremost, endorse it. The endorsement should be number one. The AU should endorse this arrangement. So when you endorse the arrangement, then one, it becomes easier for the two member states involved, that they are operating within a framework that is acceptable within the African Union arrangement and not outside. So it should not be fought. Second, when you endorse it, sell it to partners to accept it. Partners may not necessarily come along with the funding, but at least they should accept it and not fight it. So that is the first success. The second aspect is expertise. That's why earlier on I said that our structures within the Commission to do with peace and security need to be enhanced. I singled out to PSOD. So our structures should be able to have that capacity to support in terms of expertise. I think those would be two critical areas that would work in as far as linking the two are concerned. Maybe I can, my colleagues here will also, I think there is a question that the second last question, which was to do with the competence, assuming there was funding. I hope I'm correct. I hope I got you. So would the regional arrangement mechanism and the African Union, would we have the capacity to perform or to carry out these missions? Yes, we would have that capacity because already the capacity is there. Where the missions are funded, there are many thousands of African peacekeepers, be they military personnel, police personnel, civilian personnel. So the capacity is there. I think the key thing is, and even for this bilateral arrangement that I just talked about, and even the regional arrangements that we mentioned earlier, I gave an example of ICRAF, where I said that the first, when one ability to deploy rapidly is indeed one big element of capacity, which ICRAF had. Two, ability to launch themselves in theater, and when they are in theater, they perform their tasks as they did in the first few months, and the area they were occupying or their area of operation was pacified, and they were already engaging with parties to the conflict. So the capacity is there. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's do this in order. So from the Irish embassy representative, I think we've talked a little bit about AU rec friction, but I think the question here was internal rec friction, if I understood that correctly. So does anybody want to take on that hot potato?
Thanks, Shawit, for the question. I'll try to respond to this question of the primacy of politics and what you just mentioned also, tension among member states within the REC and what it means also. I mean, to bring it to the context of the discussion today, what does it mean for peace support operation deployment? I think the primacy of political solution, in my view, is a necessity that everybody recognizes, but a necessity which everybody is grappling to operationalize. And there are a number of factors. I think if you bring it down, it also goes to the question of how member states are grappling sometimes to prioritize Pan-African intents and objectives over national security interest and all of that. I think this is a very critical factor that helps, that prevents from political solution to happening, but it differs from context to another, from one context to another. I think we heard earlier in the morning about how do you bring on political solution to Somalia? That's a different context than if you take it to elsewhere. And then perhaps going to this contestation among member states or within a REC, I think we've seen the impact in terms of the dissolution of the G5, and we've also seen it. Some member states are leaving MNJTF also in the fight against Boko Haram. So it has an impact. But then again, if you take this question to the whole discussion about ABSA, REX, AU-REX relationship and everything, I think after 2 decades of implementation of ABSA, so not to answer or not to address these issues in isolation, I think it's high time to have this holistic understanding, holistic revisiting of ABSA. It was an instrument that was apt for its time, but I think it's also good to reflect what it means in terms of clarifying norms, clarifying relationship, subsidiary relationship. What does that even mean exactly in the real terms? Because we heard AU officials time and again speaking the twin challenge of the narrow reading of subsidiarity and sovereignty being as a key challenge in terms of their decision-making roles. Yeah, thank you.
I wonder if we can turn to Ahmed Samer, because I'm just aware that it can be very uncomfortable to be hanging online. Mr. Samer, do you want to add to anything that you've heard? Hello? Okay, let's move on. Yes, please.
The other questions have been addressed, but the second question about how this trend is influence to bring developmental changes to conflict situations. I think the trends have existed for a while, and this shows us that the challenges are inherently complex. And that does not mean that there will be a single definitive solution or a perfect model for the existing problems or tackling the challenges. So we should acknowledge from the outset how the outcome is unlikely, this unlikely outcomes, and instead it's better to look the progresses that have been made, largely involving continuous adaptation, experimentation, and also making the best use of available resources and political willingness of the parties in the process. I think that's the best solution in terms of bringing a pragmatic approach to the problem. So that's how I see it, having through the process, exploring what's existing and making the best use of the problems, making the best use of the tools that we have.
Just maybe to add on to that, a part of the problem may be if you have an unreconstructed state that is attempting to become a developmental state, that can be problematic in terms. We're talking now about the Lake Chad region and MNJTF, I would suggest. We have another question here from.
Thank you so much. Mine is not really a question. I just wanted to react to what David said about reviewing APSA. I know I see it in many papers. I see it, in fact, in some AU pronouncements. But I think it's a very risky undertaking. But I would add an unnecessary undertaking. When you read the PSC protocol, and the APSA does not limit itself to the PSC protocol. In fact, you have to look at all the instruments that have been developed on governance. I think the ambassador of Rwanda rightly pointed out the challenge of governance in Africa. And these are all extremely well covered by AU instruments, from the Convention on Corruption to the APRM to the Charter on Democracy, the Charter on Local Governance, on Administration, and so on. I could list a whole set of instruments that have been developed. There is no single issue. When I look at the conflict situations or issues of unconstitutional changes, which is not adequately addressed by the current instruments. Even when I hear people talking about UCGs, or we need to tighten the rules, maybe they have not properly read what exists. It's all there, absolutely all there. Well, it's not the purpose of the discussion here, but I could give examples. The challenge of the AU is one that President Kagame identified in his report, is the challenge of implementation. That's the real challenge. And if I was to volunteer an advice to the new commission, it's definitely not to engage in a review of documents that would be a complete waste of time and resources. The challenge is, let's implement what exists. And believe me, if AU Commission and member states and Africans collectively manage to implement even a fraction of what exists, the fate of the quantum would be completely different. And my last point is, Because often, of course, it's difficult because people have to put themselves back and see how this instrument came about, because that history is lost on people. Now, I was fortunate enough to be part of that history and to know how exactly people came up with the PACE protocol, the drafting, what went into it. It was a very particular context in the history of Africa. If you were to restart that process today, you will get instruments that would be by far less forward-looking and revolutionary, and for reasons linked to context. That's why I say it's even risky, dangerous, and unnecessary. And I see it in papers in a number of, I'm working on a paper on unconscious change, a working paper to explain precisely why it is absolutely unnecessary. Our challenge is a challenge of implementation. It's not design, it's not instruments. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Yeah, the gentleman, we'll take a few more, please. The gentleman back there.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you also all panelists for the insights. Mine is two things. One is directly go to Ambassador of Rwanda on the issue of the African solution for Africa problems. As we are speaking on the future of peacekeeping operations, how this will work, how this motto will work in the future. If we say African solution for African problem, meaning it is the problems will be solved by Africans, but still we are looking for financial support, or we are looking the globe to come and support in solving our problems. So how that will be, that will work in future peacekeeping. The second thing is considering the trends now we are looking, that is the UN is reducing its peacekeeping deployments on the one hand. On the other hand, the conflict dynamics complexity is increasing, particularly in Africa. So this entails us the burden will be on Africa. So how the AU should position itself to solve those problems, and also to see the roles of the RECs and the AUs in the future of peace support operations in the African context. Considering that even the financial issue 2719 resolution is only consider AU-led peace support operations. Does it include the RECs-led or bilateral or coalition of willings peace support operations? So how the AU, all those things should be shaped for the future of peace support operations. Thank you.
Briefly, and then I think we need to wrap.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Huluf Woldesilase from the Inclusive Peace, and we are grateful for being invited to this important event. I just want to raise just a few points. I appreciate the presentations and the sharing so far. My just few concerns that has not been effectively highlighted according to my understanding so far is that in peacekeeping processes in Africa going forward, how could we innovatively emphasize the inclusiveness of women in this process? And even in the morning presentation and now, what are we going to change if we don't emphasize this kind of inclusivity? Not only women, but there is another very important point that has been raised by His Excellency, the Ambassador of Rwanda, the historical approach that we need to take. I think going forward, AU must listen to the ground, to the people. We have to find a way of listening to the population. What is the experience? There are wounds. If we don't approach of listening to these people, the hard approach, the mechanical approach, state to state, that is a bit remote from the human experience. How could we innovatively bring communities on board in this process? I did not see that coming out, though I didn't go through the document and even in the presentation. So that aspect of narration, inclusion, and strategic communication should be emphasized. That's what I wanted to share. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we're now stretching our luck here. We're running into people's lunch times. So we're going to wrap, but is there any quick responses to the questions we've heard? Thank you very much.
And thank you very much. Maybe just by way of clarifying what I mentioned about the issue of APSA review. So we're not just talking about a major, let's say, 100% review of APSA and replacing it with something else, but we're referring to the APSA review in the context of three things. First of all, in terms of clarifying roles of AU, REX, and all of that. And I think that's important in terms of I mean, the evolutions that we've seen in the last 2 decades or so, I think that requires some clarification as well. And secondly, also in terms of clarifying norms, clarifying some of the APSA norms. So that's why I'm also, as think tanks, we're also very much interested in seeing some change around this clarification of certain APSA norms. The leadership is talking about it. We're seeing the challenge on the ground, how subsidiarity, how issues of sovereignty come in terms of affecting some of the interventions on the ground. And finally, generating some sort of the required momentum that's critical in terms of addressing the various challenge, but not having, let's say, a total castaway of APSA. Thank you very much.